Our first reader tonight is Lori Haight. She was fished Alaska for many years. Her partner Smitty used to read here and perform here. He was a hell of a poet, even better fisherman, and he was a jack of all trades, a real handyman. He was electrical genius, I think. Just many, many things, and a good man to a lot of people. Come on, Lori. So without further ado, here she is, the half of the fishing team, Miss Lori.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Louder? Oh dear. Okay. I got to be close. Okay, well, I need to be close to what I'm reading to. Right. Okay. So I'm Smitty's widow. A lot of you may have heard him in the past. He was at FisherPoets from the very beginning, and was one of the favorites. So what I'm going to read to you tonight is from a book that I wrote about our sailing adventures, Water of Life from Alaska to New Zealand. And this is going to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that a fisherman or an ex-fisherman would run into when he's taking off on a new kind of adventure. So we are in the Galapagos Islands. We are on our way to French Polynesia, and it is a 1986. On June 16th, with the first sunny day we'd seen since arriving, we did our last-minute shopping, clearing out of the country and sailing toward the west at noon, with 2,900 miles of open ocean between us and the Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. Secretly, we each held our own apprehensions, being unable to picture what to fear, and thinking about this incredible voyage was a bit intimidating. On land, dangers are everywhere, but they are known, and we get used to dealing with them. But now, my worry was enhanced by ignorance. What would happen? Our longest passage started with light and variable winds, which kept us busy changing the sails during the first 18 hours. When Akvavit broke free of the island's wind shadow, clean breezes from the south gave a steady thrust. Once we were sailing, I forgot my anxiety, but I always took the greatest care when moving about the deck, knowing that I would die if I fell overboard. There was no question about that. It took us both a couple of days to get used to the constant motion of the sea again. We took turns standing watch. The ocean was so empty that it only seemed to require a quick look around every 20 minutes. With the autopilot steering and other instruments faithfully reporting our position, wind speed, and direction, we tried to maintain a normal daytime routine. During the days, Smitty and I amused ourselves by playing dominoes, backgammon, and cribbage, while Akvavit sailed herself. Since meal preparation took considerable time, I busied myself with that chore. There really wasn't much to do except note our position on the chart and look around at the wide expanse of sea and sky. As the wind gradually shifted to our stern, we let the sails out a little farther, but that was about all we had to do. Smitty and I could each manage small sail adjustments alone. At night, we were each left alone on watch to delve into our deepest thoughts while listening to the familiar and comforting creaks of the boat and the gentle wind playing through the shrouds and stays. The nights were ebony black, with countless stars twinkling above whenever the sky was clear. Silent, dark waves gently lifted and swept under Akvavit's keel. The water rushing along her hull whispered a tune of travel. During my watch, I often sat on the top of the companionway ladder with arms folded on the hatch cover and looked for lights of other vessels, never seeing any. I enjoyed the cool tropical breezes playing in my hair while contemplating the mysteries of the heavens. There was something special about being all alone. Those delicious moments gave me a feeling of ultimate power to control my destiny. My actions were purposeful and filled with the deepest responsibility. Averaging 120 miles a day with 15 to 20 knots wind on the port beam, we enjoyed the pleasant ride. It seemed like we should have been traveling farther each day, but the northern equatorial countercurrent ran against us at 3 knots. While on deck during the 4th day, I spotted something in the water and ran to the hatch to holler down to Smitty. "Come and see what's out here." He climbed on deck and said, "Those are pilot whales, the largest member of the dolphin family. You can tell by their bulbous heads. Looks like there's about 2 dozen. The blunt-faced whales were black, with a light gray saddle behind their low dorsal fins. I estimated their length to be 15 to 20 feet. They swam along beside us for nearly half an hour before veering off. Things like that provided a break in an otherwise formless time and space. It gave us a great deal of pleasure, not only to be seeing them, but to be seeing anything at all. On land, our senses are overloaded, but way out there at sea, any small observation assumed importance. The vast, mysterious ocean looked the same in every direction. Undulating water surrounded us and took on a steely gray hue beneath pale, overcast sky. With so little contrast, seeing a single bird became an event. "Fish on!" Smitty suddenly yelled as he jumped up and grabbed his hand line. "Looks like a Dorado." I caught a glimpse of bright blue and green as the fish fought desperately. Another Dorado swam along nearby. Just as Smitty was about to swing the beautiful creature aboard, it slipped the hook and disappeared into the depths. "Oh, no, I was already eating it," he said. "Tomorrow I'm going to rig up a rod holder and start using my big game pole," he told me. "I'll have a much better chance of keeping the fish on." Fortunately, a few hours later, he hooked an even bigger one and successfully brought it aboard. This bonanza gave me something to focus my attention on. That evening, we enjoyed a deluxe gourmet Dorado dinner. That night, the breeze dropped off to 9 knots, causing the sails to flap. We finally went out to reef the main and discovered that 2 of the mainsail's foot slugs were broken. They were inch-long, dowel-shaped pieces of plastic with a wire loop on top. The slugs fit into a slot on top of the boom and were sewn to the sail, holding it in place. "I'll fix these tomorrow," Smitty said. The morning dawned with light winds and overcast skies. When Smitty started the engine and pulled in the drogue, he found that the line was chafed at the shaft end shackle. We didn't want to lose another one, as it really helped keep the batteries charged. I spliced an eye on the line while Smitty went to the engine room to fabricate 2 more sail slugs. He cut pieces of stainless steel rod and welded wire loops to them. To replace the defective ones, it was necessary to take an entire sail off the mast and boom, sew the new slugs in place, then bend the sail back on. It took us until just after noon to complete the job. By then, the sun shone brightly on a smooth ocean. After lunching on Dorado steak and eggs, he rigged up a rod holder and fixed it to the stern pulpit with his heavy-duty pole and big game Ocean City reel trailing the lure. He declared, "Fishing season is now open on Akvavit." On June 21st, 5 days out, we got a lift in the morning and set the sails on port tack. At midday, the boat seemed to really pick up speed. When he looked around, Smitty said, "We're going in the wrong direction. The rudder angle indicator shows that the rudder is hard over to starboard, but we're not turning." Smitty disengaged the pilot and spun the wheel. Nothing happened. "What the hell? We better take the sails down and figure out what's wrong." "Oh, what do you mean?" I asked with the edge of trepidation creeping into my voice. "I mean that we can't steer the boat." It wasn't easy getting the sails down with no way to change course and them full of wind. When we finally set dead in the water, wallowing hard in the swell, he said, "I'm going down to take a look." "You're going to swim under the boat?" I asked. "Yeah, something happened to the rudder." My heart raced faster as he got out his snorkel mask and fins. I remembered my time on a different sailboat, the Alana, during a passage from Hawaii to Tahiti in 1978. We were becalmed in the doldrums and decided to take a swim. One of our crew members swam into a Portuguese man-of-war and was stung so badly that he almost died. I had total faith in Smitty's ability to fix things, but if something happened to him out here, I didn't know what I'd do. "Well, you're not going without a safety line tying around your waist," I said with finality. "I've heard that fish will sometimes swim along in the shadow of a boat. A shark could be down there. Please be careful, honey. I need you to be all right." I clung to the line as he eased himself down the stern ladder. He slipped into the ocean, looked around, then dove under the boat. As I gazed around, the barren horizon, alarm gripped me. "Oh, God, don't let anything happen to him," I prayed aloud. When he came up for air, he said, "We're rolling so much, I can't tell what's wrong. Hoist the mizzen sails so the wind will turn the bow toward the waves." I deftly did as I was told. Doing something familiar calmed me a little. When Akavit swung into the wind, she quit rolling and Smitty dove down again. "The weld on the rudder flange is broken," he told me when he surfaced. Climbing back aboard, he said, "I'm going to put a clamp on the aft edge of the rudder and attach lines. We can use them to turn it." While he got the clamp ready, I dug a couple of extra sheet lines out of the sail locker. After he got the lines rigged, we tried moving the rudder by hand. Unfortunately, it wouldn't turn without leading the lines to the winches. Even so, they took a tremendous strain and chafed on the cap rails and chines of the boat. The rudder bearing must have swollen up again. With the pilot constantly trying to keep us on course, it fatigued the weld, which finally broke. "Oh, if we can't steer, what are we going to do?" I asked. "We're 600 miles west of the Galapagos and 2,300 miles from the Marquesas." "Well, first let's center the runner. Once we get going, we can steer by trimming the sails. I'm sure we can make it to the French Polynesia okay." I felt a pang of dread in my stomach. I had to persuade him to turn around. "Are you crazy? We've got to go back. It's only a few days sailing back to the Galapagos, and we'll have the equatorial current helping us. Besides," I said, thinking fast, "with the wind coming from the southeast, it'll be harder to control the boat sailing downwind." "I guess you're right," he said reluctantly. "Let's pull up the sails and see what happens." Once we get on course, I'll jury rig an emergency trim rudder. We can use that once we figure out where to anchor. His self-assurance went a long way in calming my nerves. I knew he would get us safely out of this mess. A brilliant sunset painted the western sky with vermilion and magenta before we figured out how to balance the boat using the sails. It was a crash course in sail trimming. Akavit did a couple 360s before we got the hang of it. We finally had Akavit going to the east. She galloped like a champion at 6.5 knots into 17-knot winds on the starboard bow. We maintained this point of sail all night and both managed to get some much-needed rest. Every hour, one of us would check the sat-nav to be sure we were stayed on course. When it got light, Smitty started working on a small rudder. From his stash of spare parts and materials in the hold, he dug out a 2 by 3 foot piece of inch-thick plywood. By attaching a long pipe to one edge and fabricating hinges to clamp to the stern ladder, he was able to mount it in place by 3 o'clock that afternoon. In the first 24 hours, we'd made 125 miles back toward the Galapagos. "I'm going to rig this little ladder to the steering wheel," he told me. "Chains from the steering station turn the rudder post, so I need to attach our emergency tiller to that post. Then I can figure out how to connect it to the trim rudder." I headed for the hatch, saying, "I'll get the emergency tiller. It's under our bunk." I opened the doors to the storage space below the bed in our stateroom and crawled halfway in. I found the device way back in the stern behind a score of other items. Lugging it up to the deck, I said, "Here, honey, I'll get things organized below." I knew that the tiller's shaft had to feed down through a hole in the deck and through the center of our bed to the rudder post. While Smitty took the cap off the deck fitting, I tore our bed apart, making room for the shaft. "Okay, I'm ready," I shouted up through the small hole. Smitty carefully lowered the tiller, and I guided the end onto the rudder post. It took the rest of the day for him to figure out how to attach it to his makeshift rudder with a series of connecting rods. When he got it hooked up, he said, "I want to try out my new creation, see how it works." It appeared to do the job just fine. The only difference was that when he turned the wheel to port, the boat went to starboard, and vice versa, a small price to pay for the ability to steer again. We eventually discovered that by sheeting the mizzen sail in or out an inch, we could change our direction slightly. As the sun set on the second day of our return, scattered clouds dotted the sky, and we spotted a lone whale 50 yards off the stern. With a constant 20-knot wind on the starboard bow, we made steady progress through another night. On the morning of June 23rd, I told Smitty, "We've been on a course of 72 degrees and pinching tight. I've been studying the charts. We can either go into Punta Espinosa on Isla Fernandina or Caleta Tagus on Isla Isabela. The Caleta is a well-protected anchorage in the center of a sunken volcano, but we need to make 85 degrees to get there. Maybe the wind will swing a little more to the south." "It should, based on how it was blowing when we left last week," Smitty said. With the boat surging over the ocean swells, the pressure of the waves proved too much for the fragile trim rudder and bent its shaft. Smitty took it off and I helped him straighten it out. Took the rest of the day to reinforce it with stainless steel pipe. He wanted to test it again, but I protested. "Please save it for when we need it, honey. You already know that it'll work. Don't take another chance with it now. We're making great time and nearly halfway back already." In the late afternoon of the third day, the wind shifted more to the south, making it possible to head for the Caleta. To keep us on our heading as the wind clocked farther around, we sheeted all the sails out during the night. By 11 a.m. on June 25th, we cruised smoothly on a beam reach, a mere 8 miles from Fernandina Island. Shortly after lunch, the island blocked our wind and we furled all the sails. It was now or never for the trim rudder. Smitty started the engine. Running at 1,100 RPMs, we continued on a steady course at 6.5 knots under scattered clouds. The little rudder proved itself and safely guided us into Caleta Tagus, where we dropped the pick at 4 p.m. And if you want to know how Smitty fixed the rudder, you'll have to buy my book. It's in the gear shack.